Hello, and welcome to our fourth lesson in The Little Prince. Today we are beginning with the little prince in chapter 11, visiting the conceited man. I'm going to read and then talk, okay? The second planet was inhabited by a conceited man. Conceited means proud. He thinks very highly of himself. And this man thought the little prince was an admirer, a person who admired him, because to conceited people, everybody is an admirer. When I used to read this book as a young person, I remember wondering if I was a conceited man, and if, for me, all the world was an admirer. So the little prince said, "Good morning. When I was little, I used to always say good morning, politely, thinking of the little prince." Literally thinking of the little prince. I would greet adults with good morning as I would pass them by. So the little prince begins, "Good morning. That's a queer hat you're wearing." It is a hat for salutes. Saluting is this. It's like a military. But it also means to give honor. So the conceited man expects you to give him honor. And in the olden days, when someone gave you honor, you lifted your hat. So he wore a hat so that he would have something to lift when his admirers would applaud him. He would lift his hat until they stopped clapping, and then he would put it back down. So the conceited man told him that his hat had the purpose of being lifted when people applauded him. And the little prince didn't really understand. So the conceited man told him, "Clap your hands, one against the other." And when the little prince did that, the conceited man lifted the hat in modest salute. And the little prince enjoyed it, so he did it again. And the conceited man lifted his hat again. That's all he did. In 5 minutes, the little prince was bored. How boring are conceited people, only interested in talking about themselves. And the conceited man asked the little prince directly, "Do you admire me very much?" He always wanted to hear that he was the most handsome, intelligent, best dressed, richest person on the planet. But, of course, he was the only person on the planet. So it was meaningless for the little prince to say he was the best. His superiority depended on being alone, no competition. It was a foolish and meaningless pride. It says in the Bible that those of us who compare ourselves to others are stupid. We should not compare ourselves to others. We should not be conceited men. And I notice this man is all alone on his planet, just waiting for someone to come and admire him. I often wondered whether I was alone on my planet, waiting for someone to admire me, but not able to be a friend. The conceited man did not try to make friends with the little prince. He only wanted to be admired. He was lonely, but he couldn't make friends because he could only hear praise and admiration. This makes me feel like this could be me, and I don't want it to be me. Chapter 12, the tippler. A tippler is a person who drinks alcohol and gets drunk. We would call him an alcoholic. So the next planet the little prince went to was inhabited by a tippler, an alcoholic, who sat at a table all alone on his planet drinking. Notice when we say drinking, we mean alcohol, and we mean to excess, getting drunk, drinking too much. So the little prince came, and this was a short visit, but it was very depressing. It made the little prince very sad. It says it plunged him into a deep dejection. "What are you doing?" the little prince asked. "I'm drinking," said the tippler. "Why are you drinking?" asked the prince. "To help me forget." "What do you want to forget?" asked the prince. "That I am ashamed. I feel bad about who I am. I hate myself." "What are you ashamed of?" "I'm ashamed of drinking." And after that, the tippler fell into an impregnable silence. In other words, he refused to speak again. So you see, he was caught in a circle, drinking to forget that he was ashamed of drinking. But he did not allow the little prince to help him or to befriend him. He just stayed sunk in silence. And the little prince went away saying, "Grown-ups are very, very odd." I want to point out that on each of these planets, he meets a single grown-up who openly shows his character, and he has one primary characteristic that is a characteristic of grown-ups. We learn about grown-ups, the allegory of grown-ups, from these people. Chapter 13, the little prince visits the businessman. So the fourth planet he visited belonged to a businessman. Again, the man is all alone on his planet. But this time, he is so busy he doesn't even look up. He doesn't even notice when the little prince arrives. He is counting or adding figures. 3 and 2 make 5. 5 and 7 make 12. 12 and 3 make 15. Good morning. 15 and 7 make 22. 22 and 6 make 28. He's so busy he doesn't have time to light his cigarette, which has gone out. And the little prince asks, "What is he counting?" And the businessman doesn't want to take time to answer. But the little prince refuses to go away and refuses to let go of the question. So the businessman tries to tell him what he is counting, but he can't remember what they are called. So he says, those little objects which one sometimes sees in the sky. Flies, asks the little prince. No, glittering objects. That means putting out light. Bees? No, little golden objects that set lazy men to dreaming. How many poets have dreamed while looking at the stars? As for me, I am concerned with matters of consequence. Matters of consequence means things that are important. Too important for worrying about the name of those things up there or being poetic while looking at them. No time for idle dreaming. Ah, you mean the stars. Yes, that's it. The stars. He couldn't remember what they were called, but he counted 5 million of them. What do you do with 500 million stars? 501,622,731. I am concerned with matters of consequence. I am accurate. Matters of consequence, important things. I am accurate. He thinks that's important. What do you do with the stars? What do I do with them? Yes. Nothing. I own them. You own the stars? Yes. But I have already seen a king who kings do not own. They reign over. That is a very different matter. So we could meditate for a moment on the difference between owning and governing, reigning over. The prince asked, what good does it do you to own the stars? One might ask this of all of our possessions. What good does it do you to own them? It makes me rich. You know, I think about the fact that people need food and clothing and shelter and a few other things to make life nice. But nobody needs millions of dollars. If you have millions of dollars, it sits in the bank. You can only eat so much food. You can only wear one set of clothing at a time. What good does it do us to be rich? The St. Paul in the Bible says, if I have food and clothing, I am content. It does me the good of making me rich. And what good does it do you to be rich? It makes it possible for me to buy more stars, if any are discovered. So what's the use? It's circular. This man, the little prince, said to himself, reasons, thinks, a little like my poor tippler. The little prince felt sorry for the tippler. And this man was also caught in a circular reasoning that trapped him. Nevertheless, he still had more questions, the prince. How is it possible for one to own the stars? To whom do they belong? The businessman retorted peevishly. Peevishly means with irritation. Who does it belong to? The answer to the question, how is it possible for you to own the stars, is simply, I thought of it first. It's my idea. And I write down the number and put it in a drawer and declare that I own it. It reminds me a little bit of when the settlers came over from England, maybe, and planted a flag in America, claiming the land for the Queen. That had big consequences, though, for the Indians especially. So the prince asks, well, what do you do with the stars? And he says, I administer them. I count them and recount them. And he considers this to be a matter of consequence. But the little prince was not satisfied. The little prince thinks for himself. And this is his thought right now. He said, if I owned a silk scarf, I could put it around my neck and take it away with me. If I owned a flower, he considers a flower the most precious thing in the world, I could pluck the flower and take it with me. But you cannot pluck the stars from the heaven. No, but I can put them in the bank. What does that mean? It means that I write the number of my stars on a little piece of paper. And then I put this paper in a drawer and lock it with a key. And that's all? That's enough, said the businessman. It's entertaining, thought the little prince, and rather poetic, but it is of no great consequence. So the little prince has his own idea of what is important, and what this businessman says is important is not. I think about the image of Wall Street, the place in the United States where people buy and sell stocks. And you have many men on computers buying and selling, buying and selling, buying and selling, buying and selling, making money for their clients. And the money is all just digital. But if you buy low and sell high, then you have made money. And they do this all day until they have a heart attack at the age of 30. They are busy with matters of consequence. The little prince would not agree. To him, a silk scarf or a flower could be more important than millions of dollars in the stock exchange. He says, I myself own a flower. He continued his conversation with the businessman, which I water every day. I own 3 volcanoes, which I clean out every week, for I also clean out the one that is extinct. One never knows. It is of some use to my volcanoes, and it is of some use to my flower that I own them. But you are of no use to the stars. The businessman opened his mouth but found nothing to say, and the prince went away, saying, grown-ups are certainly altogether extraordinary. The little prince is learning and growing. The little prince is asking questions, exploring. He has an open mind and an open heart, and he wants to learn and understand life. And when he sees something, he makes his own decision about it. And by doing this, he clarifies what is valuable in the world. Chapter 14. The little prince visits the lamplighter. The 5th planet was very strange. It was very small. It was the smallest planet of all. It had no room for anything other than a lamp on a pole and a man with a stick and a fire to light it and then turn it around and snuff it back out. And the man did this over and over. He just kept lighting it and then snuffing it out. Snuffing it is when you have a cup on a flame and you go whoosh, and put the flame out. And the little prince asks the lamplighter why he's doing this. And meanwhile, the sun comes up and the lamplighter puts out the lamp. And then the sun goes back down. And the lamplighter relights it. Good morning, good evening, he says. It turns out that the planet used to be probably much larger. Certainly it used to go around more slowly. Like our planet takes 24 hours to go around. So a lamplighter on our planet would light his lamp at sundown, and then he would have 12 hours of sleep before he had to put his lamp out in the morning. And then he would have 12 hours in the day to do anything he wanted before it was time to light his lamp again. So it would be a good life. But on this planet, it's so small and going around so fast that he has to light his lamp and put it out every minute. Those are his orders. He's very unhappy because he's lonely and there's no room on his planet for anyone to stay but himself. And because he's tired. He wants to sleep and he never ever can sleep. The little prince tries to help him by suggesting that he just walk and always keep the sun in sight, and he wouldn't have to light his lamp. He could just have a rest. But that wouldn't enable the lamplighter to sleep, so it was no good. And in the end, the little prince had to go away because there was no room on the planet and he couldn't help the lamplighter. But he felt that the occupation, the job of lighting the lamp was beautiful because it lit up a star. And he said that because it is beautiful, it is truly useful. A useful occupation, even though somewhat absurd. Also, the little prince felt love for the lamplighter because he was faithful to his duty, his orders. This is the first time the little prince has felt love for any of the people he's met. He felt pity for the tippler, but he feels love for the lamplighter. He would have liked to have been his friend, but the lamplighter had no room on his planet for a friend. He was a grown-up. Also, the little prince noticed that this was a planet with 1,440 sunsets. And remember how much the little prince loved sunsets because he was lonely. It says, even though the lamplighter was a little bit ridiculous or absurd because of what he was doing, even though he was absurd, he did not seem ridiculous to the little prince because he was thinking of something other than himself. And of course, the other people that the little prince had met we're very self-absorbed. So again, something beautiful, to be concerned with that which is outside of yourself, to give yourself to your duty, to have a job that is beautiful. All these things are valuable to the Little Prince. Chapter 15. By the way, there is a certain kind of literature, I forget the name, but it is a genre. Where's my... Genre is spelled G-E-N-R-E, and it's pronounced genre. There is a genre of literature in which the hero travels, and in each place or each episode he learns something about himself. The Little Prince is this kind of literature. So he visits a geographer. This is a man on a planet, an old man, writing a book. And when he sees the Little Prince, he says, "Look, an explorer." And he says he is a geographer, a person who knows where all the oceans and deserts and mountains and seas and rivers and towns are, which impresses the Little Prince at first. But then when the Little Prince asks, "Does your planet have any deserts or mountains or towns?" the geographer says, "I don't know." He doesn't look to see if there are these things on his planet because he thinks it is not his job. He thinks that only an explorer would find these things and see them. And so he is narrow-minded. All of these people that the Little Prince meets are in some sense narrow. They are not wide. They are not open. They are not exploring and learning and improving themselves. They are stuck. And this geographer doesn't even know his own planet because he believes that it is not his job to explore. So the Little Prince realizes that this one too is ridiculous. Now, the geographer says something very important to the Little Prince. He is asking the Little Prince about his home planet because he wants to write it in his book. And the Little Prince tells him, "I have 3 volcanoes, 2 active, 1 extinct. But one never knows whether the extinct one will come back to life." And the geographer alone answers, "One never knows." He agrees. He's a smart man. And then the Little Prince goes on to tell about his flower. And the geographer says, "I don't care about the flower." And the Little Prince says, "Why not? Excuse me, she is the most beautiful thing on my planet, in my world." And the geographer says, "She is ephemeral." Ephemeral. Which means in danger of speedy disappearance. The geographer is only interested in matters of consequence. that which is eternal, like a mountain or a desert. He is not interested in writing down in a book something which is here today and gone tomorrow. He considers that anything ephemeral is not important. But when he says that to the little prince, for the first time, the little prince feels a stab of regret for leaving his flower, because he thinks, she is ephemeral, she is in danger of speedy disappearance, she is vulnerable, and I have left her alone, and she has only 4 claws with which to defend herself. He's filled with pity for his flower, who made such a brave statement. I am afraid of nothing. I have my claws. And he realizes she is ephemeral. So, this was a very important visit for the little prince, to discover that he has left behind something he loves and something which is in danger. You know, Antonie de Saint-Exupéry is the little prince, and he is the narrator, the pilot in this book. It's interesting that both main characters represent the author, different aspects of himself. The little prince represents the self that Saint-Exupéry wanted to be, innocent, open, filled with wonder, filled with joy. The pilot represented the Saint-Exupéry that he thought himself to be. An airplane pilot, working on an airplane, flying among the stars, having experiences, but grown up. And the real Saint-Exupéry was married to a woman who was very much like the rose, his wife. And she was ephemeral. She was in danger of speedy disappearance. And once when he left her, she became so ill that she was hospitalized and almost died. And he had to go and rescue her because she was pining away for him. His rose was ephemeral. So, the geographer. The geographer told the little prince that his flower was ephemeral, and this opened the little prince's eyes, filled him with compassion and love, and made him regret leaving his planet for the first time. But nonetheless, he moves on with his journey, and he asks the geographer for advice. Where should I go next? Thinking the geographer would know very well, and the geographer has a good idea. Visit Earth. It has a good reputation. So the little prince takes off for Earth. So we'll look at that portion of our story next week. You know, I identify so strongly with this book. This book has shaped my life very profoundly because I read it. Well, I didn't read it. It was read to me before I was in school, when I was a little child of 4 or 5 years. And I read it for myself many times throughout my growing up and adult life as well. It's a beautiful tale. I hope you're enjoying it. See you next week.